Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Latter-day Bridge Builders. That's the podcast that we're on.
That is it.
Mitch, would you like to begin our usual introduction?
Of course, I'm Mitch. I'm an ex-Mormon and an atheist.
I'm Juliet. I'm an inactive Mormon, and I I feel like I should start saying I don't believe the church is true.
And I'm Ashton, and I am an active member of the LDS Church or the Mormon Church, or for and on behalf of Russell M. Nelson, who is dead, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And Juliet, who is presiding at this meeting, has asked me to
That's
conduct.
correct. Yes. As long as you do a good job.
Okay.
Okay.
We have a guest today that we're super excited to have on, Andy Newman. I'll let Juliet introduce him. I'm new to your content as of this morning, but I'm excited about it and excited
Awesome.
to chat all together.
Yeah.
New follower.
New follower. Yep. Andy, can you introduce yourself to us?
Yeah, definitely. So I am also an ex-Mormon and identified generally as an atheist, like Mitch, although I'm not necessarily a huge fan of labels. But I am also a licensed therapist practicing in Arizona, Utah, Idaho, and a number of other states. And I would say a solid percentage of what I do as a therapist is working with people who are affected by Mormonism, whether it's people who are more in nuanced spaces trying to make the church work for them, people who've left, people who are in mixed faith marriages, maybe who are dealing with faith deconstruction or maybe religious trauma. Those are two distinct topics, by the way, and help in those spaces. And I also have a TikTok, Instagram presence where I make content about various topics connected to Mormonism. So yeah, that's me. And I live in Arizona with my wife and 3 daughters.
Awesome. So happy to have you. Quick question. As a therapist, an ex-Mormon therapist working in this space, is it your goal to make all of your clients leave the church? Is that your secret agenda?
That is definitely my secret agenda, according to a lot of reply guys.
Mhm.
But here's how I'd respond to that. That would just be exhausting. I don't know why anyone would make that their goal. My goal is a lot more straightforward. I want people to feel good about where they're at. And so for active member of the church, if they were to come to me and they leave more content and more happy about their participation in the church, I would feel great about that. And if somebody's in a nuanced place and they want to feel good about maybe participating in a way that works for them, they're going some of the time, maybe they're okay with going to Lake Powell on the weekend and even water skiing on Sundays. I want them to feel good about that if that's what they want. And of course, if people leave, I think that it's their right to feel content with that choice too, if that's what's best for them. So I just want people to feel good with where they're at. I want people to be happy. It's not that deep.
Yeah, for sure. Can you tell us about what got you on social media starting to talk about these things? Because it seems like you talk about this all day in what I would call your muggle life I don't know if we're talking about muggles anymore. I need to look into that. Um,
I grew up on Harry Potter. You're safe with me.
Yeah, you're showing your millennial side there, Julia.
Yeah. I got all of the books except for 1, 2, and 3 at midnight in Barnes and Noble. Okay, even
you're
EFY to go get book 7. True story.
okay. So you're committed. You're committed.
Oh yeah. J.K. Rowling. Have to put that disclaimer out there. Anyway,
yeah,
go on.
yeah, it's a thing. Yeah. Okay. Not the topic of our podcast. Why do you talk about this stuff on social media since you talk about it all day in your regular life?
Yeah. Really good question. The way I would answer that question is, for me, and I think for a lot of ex-Mormons, because I direct my content, I would say my content more directly towards ex-Mormons. My professional work is a lot more broad, but my content is more specifically oriented towards ex-Mormons. For a lot of us that leave, there's not a lot of people to talk to at first. It's very scary to open up about just the fact that maybe you're even having questions. A lot of people are very closeted about their faith crisis when it begins, especially about when it feels like maybe it's moving into more of a transitionary space, or they might even end up leaving the church or seriously questioning church leadership or whatever. There's a lot of pushback from people in their real lives. And for a pretty solid percentage of ex-Mormons, I believe, the first people who eventually become ex-Mormons, perhaps, the first safe place that they tend to land is some form of online content, because you can view it. You don't have to put your name on it. You don't have to advertise or open up to anybody in your real life just yet that you're experiencing these things. And for me personally, my first pit stop was content like that. And it was so helpful for me to just feel like I'm not alone, to just feel like there are a lot of other people going through this. And I want to provide that space for other people who are hurting. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. 100%. I think, yeah, even people who have been on our podcast or who we've kind of highlighted, said their name and like highlighted their work or whatever, who people who we have platformed and they're okay with us platforming them, still are not ready to be tagged like on social media, which I think just goes to show like the amount of closetedness that some people have, but also the amount of like real connection that people have like through social media. I mean, I think we are all kind of struggling with like spending too much time on social media and like, you know what I mean? I think there are definitely pitfalls to it, but I don't know. I think we all would say that like the resources through social media, podcasts or whatever have made our journeys a little bit smoother. So thanks so much for participating with it. It's definitely super needed.
I think it's very important. I agree. And I don't mean to be too self-important, because I think that there's plenty out there without me. But if I can help add to it, I want to, because yeah, it's kind of like, I don't know, people help me, so I want to return the favor.
Yeah. I have to ask, do you find that there is an enormous monetary windfall from people? Do you do this for the money? That's what I'm asking you. Do you get rich off of making ex-Mormon content on Instagram? Because that's something we've been accused of quite a bit lately. And we
Oh,
don't see the
that's
money.
funny.
So I'm wondering if maybe you know where it is.
Yeah, I would love for Instagram to start sending me these checks, because Disneyland's expensive and I want to take my girls there. No, I don't get paid anything from TikTok or Instagram. I actually know what it's like to make money on social media. I used to be a content creator for a little Star Wars mobile phone game called Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. If anyone ever played it, they might know me first as Cubs fan Hunt. That's another story, but I did that full time for a while, and the level of stress that goes into actually making money on social media is wild to me. And so I don't want to make money off this at all, because I don't want it to become something that I'm relying on to provide for my family. So even if I did, I'd kind of rather not, because I've been there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like there's often this narrative that I hear that like people who make ex-Mormon content or even the kind of content which we make that it's not typically, I wouldn't typically call it like ex-Mormon or like anti-Mormon at all, that like we're doing it for the money, which I'm like, yo, I do not have the dedication to
Right.
like make this like make us money. It's really not like we really are trying to do something good. Like um yeah,
Totally.
this
And
really
some
is
people
like
do. Some people do make money. And I also want to recognize that's okay. Attacking people who make money for making content is an ad hominem attack. Like, let's if you have a problem with the fact, let's say we are making money right now. Okay, cool. So you've got a problem with us making money. What about the content we're making? What about the ideas we're presenting? What about the stories we're sharing, the support that we're offering people? It feels just like kind of beside the point to me.
yeah. And also, like, if you walk into a Deseret book, you're going to be surrounded by books with titles of names of people who are making content and making money and are
Yeah.
profiting off of it. Some people very much so. Which again, which like I don't have a problem with. Like people who bring value should get paid, right? And like different people find different things valuable. But I think that just the attack of like, oh, they're doing that to make money is, like you said, like ad hominem, kind of irrelevant. And for at least the people right here, not the case. So anyway,
Maybe call
any
that priestcraft though on the Deseret book side, but I don't want to get too theological.
yeah, let's different episode. We'll have to have you back. Does anyone have anything to say just before we kind of jump into the meat of the episode, which is Andy, be our therapist?
Ooh, okay.
No.
That's
Okay.
me.
So what I'm hoping to do today is to take advantage of your skills for free and give you some scenarios, things that I often hear come up in the ex-Mormon, maybe nuanced kind of deconstruction space, just
Yeah.
kind of things that I see people go through over and over and over again, and have you give us some kind of like practical advice of what you would say to these people. Not that we're prescribing how anyone should live their life, but what are some things to consider? What are some tools? And maybe just like, sort of help people have some ideas of how to just where to begin, right? For people who are stuck, where to begin.
I
So
love
first,
that. And if I
Really
could
quick.
tag on a little bit to
Okay.
that as well, and for those that maybe are in a more similar position as myself, who are active and have family members that have left, or friends and loved ones that do, and how we might better respond in that context as well.
yeah. Okay, great.
I was gonna say we also want to do this kind of same thing with a therapist who's maybe a little bit more on the believing side of things, like with some different scenarios. So if you
Yeah.
fall in that camp, send us an email and we can set up a future episode. But
Yeah, to
looking
kind of
forward to
address
this.
from like the opposite perspective. So like a believing therapist addressing someone who's believing and like, maybe having people in their life leave. But for today, I love role playing. I know people think that's weird. Dude, MTC was the funnest place for me because we got to role play like all the time. And so I made these little scenarios. So here we go. I'm Juliet on my ex-Mormon journey in this scenario. Here we go. I'm beginning to have some doubts about the church, and I want to be open with my spouse, but he is extremely devout, and I don't know how he'll respond. I feel stuck. Where do I go from here?
Just blast him with John Dehlin.
Okay. Okay. Got it. Got it.
I'm kidding.
Who's
Um,
that?
Yeah.
yeah.
Just kidding.
So I would have a lot of follow-up questions. Truthfully, I think one of the more valuable places I would start is what's the fear about telling your husband?
I'm
How do
afraid
you
that he'll
find it?
leave me. I'm afraid he'll leave me because he always said that like a good Mormon girl was at the top of the list that he made in Young Men's or whatever was like a good Mormon girl. Like that's the most important thing. So I'm afraid that like our whole marriage is gonna fall apart if I open up even a little bit about this.
Wow. Yeah, that's are you wanting me to actually role play right now, or you just want me
No,
to?
no, no. Sorry. No,
Oh,
you're
okay,
good. You're
cool.
good. I just
Yeah,
follow
no,
to it so easy.
yeah. Well, I want to share maybe if I can. I've worked with situations like this that maybe I can't speak too openly about, but I can speak openly about my own situation. My wife is an active believing member. I still go to church on a somewhat regular basis, to not as much as I used to, but and when I first was having doubts and questions or whatever, that what you just presented is exactly how I felt. Only I was worried that my wife would leave me, not my husband. And I think it's a valid fear. I don't treat those fears as hyperbolic, because the reality is sometimes people do leave over this. And I don't want to necessarily, as a therapist, emphasize that fear, but I also want people to feel like it's okay to prioritize their safety. If you're not ready to tell your spouse because you're worried that they might leave you, then maybe you need a little bit of time to wrap your mind about where you're at and spend some time working through it, maybe with a therapist or working through it with somebody else that you trust. But ultimately, I do think that for something this big, because of how central Mormonism is to every marriage that began in the church, it is something that you need to find the courage to open up to your spouse about in almost every situation. The way that you approach that varies based on situation. There's definitely feelers you can get out there, just kind of test the waters a little bit. That's what a lot of people tend to prefer to do, pose hypothetical questions, or maybe start with some small concern and see how they respond and then kind of go from there. But yeah, it's so hard, because that, generally speaking, for people who are in marriages that are, not going through it together, that's the biggest fear right out the gate for almost everyone.
Yeah. Can you give us like maybe an example or two of like a feeler question?
Yeah, so I did a lot of, like, for me, the biggest issue that put me at odds with the church, it wasn't exactly why I mean, ultimately I left because I ended up coming to the conclusion I didn't believe it was true. But the most obvious um you know issue for me was the LGBTQ treatment in the church. And so I would start opening up to my wife about me disagreeing with the church on certain things, if that makes sense,
Mhm.
and just kind of seeing how that went. And so bring up some concerns, bring up some examples of things that maybe you disagree with or things that are hard for you, and see how they react. In a lot of cases, the reaction might be pretty intense. You might really be up against what you might be in a situation where it's like, yeah, I'm gonna drop this on them, and it might rock the stability of the relationship. That could be unavoidable. I don't want to pretend that it's not. My wife and I were in therapy for years. We still go on a regular basis, and we fought like crap to save our marriage. And I'm so proud of us for doing it, because it's in a much better place now. But yeah, it did. I would be lying if I said it didn't threaten our marriage as a result. And so I think at a certain point, you get to this space where you've kind of got to take the plunge.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's hard. It's hard to avoid the reality that it could damage a relationship.
Yeah. I think that particularly for like those of us who have like left, and particularly if we've left and like our marriages are intact, it's easy to just be like, you know, to be over positive about it in a way, and be like, oh, you should like be authentic, you should be who you are, like it'll all
Yeah.
work out, like maybe they'll like end up leaving too or whatever, which sure, maybe they will, but thank you for just kind of sharing like the reality that it does ruin marriages, right? And like, I don't know if, yeah, it does end marriages. It can lead to that. And certainly like pretending that that's not the case is not
Yeah.
helpful. Just like it's also helpful. We shouldn't be catastrophizing, right? Or like saying it's going to end every marriage, because it certainly doesn't end every marriage, but those possibilities are real and have to be navigated.
And I would add too, on the flip side of that, it doesn't have to end any marriage. Um, Even though it can be very destabilizing, it can be a very difficult thing to work through. I'm personally convinced, and I will die on this hill, that mixed faith marriages that work on their stuff and get their crap together are some of the best marriages out there. Because if you can nuance yourself enough, if you can differentiate yourself enough to make space for a difference of belief in Mormonism, that requires basically every skill that you need to have a healthy marriage to begin with. And so the way that I look at it is working on mixed faith marriages, it's basically just working on every skill that every marriage needs to be healthy, but you're doing it in a much more high stakes environment, perhaps,
Yeah.
because it's like sink or swim.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, thank you. I love that. I think that's like such a good point also. Um, and a little bit of hope for us there at the end. So
Yeah.
awesome.
I was in real quick on the hope piece. Sorry. I was in a group through the Marriage on a Tightrope podcast, which is a
Mhm.
great resource for anybody who's in mixed faith marriage. Alan, Katie Mount have done maybe the best work on this topic.
Yeah.
They had a mixed faith support group that I was in for years, and I love those guys. I just don't get on my Marco Polo app as much anymore. But there were hundreds of us in that group, and I would say a pretty low percentage of us got divorced. It did happen, but I think most mixed faith marriages, if you've got a good foundation and you want to make it work, it's going to be tough. You're going to go through a lot of difficult things, but I think generally speaking, they work more than they don't, from what I've seen anecdotally.
Awesome. And if anyone is in that space, Marriage on a Tightrope, Alan and Katie Mount. Alan Mount's mom and dad were the like local senior missionaries in like my singles ward when I was in Santa Barbara, and
Cool.
I love everything about every Mount. So anyway, yeah, are we ready for the next scenario?
Could I maybe jump in
course.
with one of these questions, kind of as a follow-up to the perspective from the active or believing side? If someone is beginning to question things they've believed their whole life, what does healthy questioning look like? And what are some signs that someone needs to slow down rather than consume more information? And this is a personal question for me from things I've observed and things that I've experienced in
Yeah.
in my religious spiritual life.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to answer that question succinctly. One thing I will say that I do observe that's common, especially when you get into the real throes of deconstruction in that first year, it is not uncommon for me to meet people who are consuming 3, 4, 5 hours worth of content a day
Mhm.
on this topic. Um, I don't automatically assume that that's unhealthy necessarily. And a big reason for this is I think what some of us tend to forget, or maybe we don't, it's just hard to remember. When you grow up in a system like Mormonism, it's not a religion, it's an entire worldview, it's an identity, it's in your DNA so deep that deconstructing that requires a ton of mental focus and energy for some people. And so I think that for a lot of us, yeah, you're probably going to go through a phase where you are consuming a lot of content, and you're spending a lot of time reading, etc. A couple things I'd look for though is how long is this going on? Is this going, are we 5 years in and it's still 5, 6 hours worth of content a day on the topic? How is it affecting relationships, right? Are you getting feedback from your spouse that, hey, like it's not even like, oh, I don't want you listening to this podcaster or that podcaster. It's just, I want you. I want to go on a date with you. I want to have you present here. Are you not able to be present in your relationships anymore? Those are the things I would look for where we're probably getting away from healthy processing that, yes, might look intense for a period of time, and maybe something that's more compulsive and something that is damaging active relationships.
That's awesome. So it might be variable. Healthy might be a variable thing for different people, and continuing
Definitely.
with the healthy things outside of strictly within a religious context shows that health, even though that faith journey might be happening.
That's a great way to summarize that.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Well said. Yeah.
Okay, we ready for the next one?
If I can kind of
Go.
jump in here for a second
Of
too,
course.
as I mean, I left the church officially 3 years ago. Deconstruction started about 4 years ago or so. Um, but I went to some personal therapy for a while, and I remember telling my therapist, like, there will be a day I know in my life. I don't know when this will happen, but I will like go an entire 24 hours and not think about the church once. And I was, at least at the time, it felt like so far away, but like I knew it would come one day, and now it happens more often than not, I would say. So if you are in that space, I kind of feel for you, and it gets better, the more you work on it.
I'll
Yeah.
echo that. And I see it. I saw it myself. I'm glad I'm hearing it from you, Mitch. And I see it all the time with my clients where we'll start and our entire focus is religion. And after a year or so, now we're just working on normal stuff, or they just don't need to come anymore.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Ready for the next one? You handled that like a boss, by the way, Andy.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, I'm going back into my hypothetical self. You do not have to role play with me. I'll just role play
Okay.
here by myself.
This feels like the MTC a little bit. The
Yeah,
role-playing,
which I
maybe.
love. I do.
I love the MTC.
There's
That's
nothing
fun.
about that place I don't like. One night I was laying in bed and we were like all going to bed in the dorms, and I was like, you guys, well, I probably said this, sisters, I just have a feeling there's going to be enchiladas in the cafeteria tomorrow. And there was,
Oh my
like,
gosh, the church is true. I'm going back.
magical place, magical place. Okay, here I go. I've decided I would like to keep attending church, but I don't think that keeping a lot of the commandments are important to me. So, like, I'm going to start wearing tube tops and going to Dutch Brothers and getting a medium iced golden eagle with an extra shot and whipped cream every morning. Um, how
Uh,
can I explain myself to friends or family who might call me out on it?
I love this question, and if I were to be asked this exact question, just like you did, the first thing I would probably say is, "What makes you think you need to explain anything?"
Well, and I would say, but like, because they'll probably ask me, they'll probably be like, "Oh, are you like drinking coffee?" And like, I just don't know like what I'll say.
So why do you owe them an explanation? Where does that come from? Who told you that you needed to give them a justification or an explanation for your personal choices?
Okay, Juliet, the real Juliet, is gonna comment on this. You know,
Go
one
ahead.
thing that I realized is that I assumed that people were going to look at and respond to me the same way that I looked at and responded to people. And so because I would feel, you know, like this is so embarrassing, but like I I work with a lot of people who are like LDS, and like there are times when I would see someone that I could like tell that they were wearing garments, but they also were like drinking a Starbucks. And I work in a hospital overnight and there's a Starbucks there, right? So a lot of people drink Starbucks. And I was always trying to like place people and like figure out like, wait, like, aren't they Mormon? Like it looks like they're wearing garments, but they're like, you know, like I was always trying to figure it out. Like I always felt like I was needing to place people. And so then when I like, for example, stopped following some of the rules, I assumed that everybody was being as critical of me as I had been of other people. And probably some of them were. But one thing that helped me was just deciding to give everybody the benefit of the doubt and just kind of like internally assume that actually everyone was more understanding and less critical than I had been. Um, and I found that when I went into it with a baseline assumption that people were going to be cool with me and accepting of me, that people tended to be accepting of me, you know? And I think one thing I've seen people talk about before, I guess I'm not the therapist, so maybe I shouldn't be going on this little rant, but um, is that if you is that people, some people will probably expect you to be ashamed of some of the choices that you're making. And if you act ashamed, it will like reinforce in their mind that you should be ashamed. But if you act normal about it, if you act like fine about it, like, oh yeah, it's a coffee, that's what I was in the mood for today, then it's going to challenge like the paradigm that they have, which like it's not necessarily our goal to challenge the paradigms of other people, but it's probably going to prevent them from like continuing to question you about it over and over.
I really like what you're getting at, especially because I do think that this is a key element of personal growth that most people that leave the church need to reach, which is not baseline assuming that everyone in the church is thinking the worst of them. The
Mm.
reality is that I've personally experienced, because I still have some really good friends in the church. In fact, I'm an avid runner. I run all the time with the recently released bishop of the ward that I go to sometimes. And he's a great guy. We get along really well. And I don't feel judged by him, genuinely. He knows a
Mhm.
lot about my experience too, and kind of what I've been through. But also, I think that, you know, some people probably will make comments. I have had people make comments that are shocking at times. And when people make comments about your personal choices, something else that I think is really healthy to consider is what is my relationship like with this person, and where is this comment coming from? Some people might be asking you because they're genuinely curious, right? And when I say before, like, why do you owe them an explanation? Start with that baseline. I don't owe them an explanation, but maybe I want to give them one, because maybe I trust this person enough in my life that they're asking me because they're genuinely curious. My mom was this way. My mom sat me down after I left. We went to Panera Bread once. I still remember what I got. I got a blueberry oatmeal. It was good that day. And she wanted to know why I left the church. She asked me questions about where I was at, what my decisions were, you know, things like that. But the my mom loves me the way that she, like, I didn't owe her any of the answers I gave her, but I trusted her enough to give them anyway. Versus some random person in the ward who comes up to you and goes, you know, oh wow, I saw you at Starbucks, you had a coffee. Okay, cool. I'm not going to talk about my personal choices with you. Why? I don't need to talk to you about this, right? Does that distinguishment make sense?
Mhm. It does. It does.
To me, it seems like there's a common, it's common enough, at least in our culture, that we love to judge others on the quote unquote sins that are so visible, right? Wearing garments, somewhat visible, people move, they're
Theoretically not visible, but you
theoretically,
know,
yeah.
we have our
Oh,
ways.
I still notice. I can
Yeah.
still see. Yeah.
Yeah, like you can tell or whatever, right? What's in the cup that you're drinking, all kinds of stuff, right?
Currently.
We recently had a couple we've had a couple clips of ours with a friend of ours named Stevie. she's like a very nuanced member, but still very much loves Jesus and is not keeping certain rules of the church, but still attends every week and trying to do what she can there and so forth. And anyway, we've got a lot of comments recently that are just basically saying like, you know what you should be doing and you're not doing it. Like, why do you stay? And a lot of comments are more heated, I guess you could say, than others. But I don't know. It's just a very unique part of our culture that we really like to judge each other on like these outward symbols and signs that we hold dear, but like what's going on internally, which in my opinion, which for what that is worth, I guess, matters more. Like, are you a good person? Do you treat others with kindness? Are you slow to anger and so forth? Like, those things show a higher spiritual person than maybe these things that we default to.
I love what you just said, Mitch. And it's funny that you went there because in my mind I was thinking I would much rather somebody judge me because I said something rude to somebody
Mm.
than because I'm drinking a coffee. Like drinking a coffee. By the way, this is just black coffee. I don't have a fancy order like yours. I hope that's okay. But it's benign. I get that it's a standard of the church and maybe somebody has feelings about that, but me drinking coffee today has no impact on anybody's life. But if I'm rude to somebody, that could really hurt somebody. And so please judge me if I'm being a jerk, and I can be, right? Like sometimes the reply guys get me. Sometimes I shoot a snarky reply back, right? Like I can be a jerk and maybe somebody calls me out on not being kind, and I'm always here for that kind of judgment.
Yeah. Huh. Gosh. How quick are we if somebody is rude, like I feel, or mean, or whatever it is? I feel like there's just an idea of like, oh, well, you shouldn't be offended, right? Like forgive that all day long, right? Like let's not bring it up with someone that they were badly behaved. Let's just move on from it. But, if you're, doing one of these XYZ visible things, and that's something that like people notice and can stick with them. So, yeah. Anything else before we go to our next scenario?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Go
I'm
ahead,
Ashton,
Jesus.
and I'm a recovering judgmental jerk,
Oh, that's right.
and I'm working on it.
Judgy toddler Ashton.
Judgy
Are we
toddler.
all? I think all of us are, right?
Yeah.
We just all
We're all
acknowledge
works.
that.
It's a human
And everyone
trait.
in the comments, nobody's innocent, okay?
We're all
Sure.
works in progress.
So I do have a question that relates but shifts gears a little bit, but goes to the point of my mindset, my worldview shifting by distinguishing a couple of things that I want to get some of your thoughts as well. How can you help us distinguish faith crisis, faith transition, faith expansion, and sometimes religious trauma from each other? And is there a difference between all of those things?
I personally believe there's a big difference between all three of them. I would say religious trauma, I'm going to set aside in its own category.
Sure.
I almost feel like faith crisis, faith transition, faith expansion is like in that order sometimes for a lot of people. Generally speaking, the faith crisis is the crisis of the moment of realizing that maybe what I've been taught my whole life is not what I believe anymore, or maybe there's problems with it. And I think crisis, generally speaking, is a very appropriate word for that. I was freaking out. I still remember where I was sitting. I remember what I was looking at. It's a traumatic memory for me, which again, we'll set the trauma aside, but it was so destabilizing. It was absolutely a crisis when I first started reckoning with my belief. A faith, what was the next one? Transition?
Transition, yeah.
A faith transition is, generally speaking, you've settled into the crisis a little bit and you're starting to pick up the pieces and transition to something different. An expansion, I think that's kind of similar to faith transition for me. I don't know. What do you mean by faith expansion? I think for some people, that's more like maybe they're expanding their belief system to include other religions, or they're generating maybe a more flexible view of God or whatever. Sometimes a transition might lead to that kind of more expansion, but for maybe Mitch and I, it led to something more like, nah, I don't believe in any of this anymore. Which I would not necessarily describe as a faith expansion. Is that kind of what you mean? I know
Exactly.
I asked you a question, answered
like
it.
when I think it's a human development issue where we go through crises. We talked in one of our recent podcasts about when we discover that our parents are human, that they have flaws, that they are not whole, complete people all of the time, and that can cause crisis, even just in a human development sort of way, that we have to reevaluate our worldviews. And then with expansion, jumping to there, it's like, okay, this is what I was taught, but this is my experience,
Mm.
and I need to expand my brain capacity to include both of those things, and be able to continue moving forward and not be just derailed if those things happen, because they will.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like a faith expansion is often where people continue to believe a lot of what they've been believing, but, you know, add in more space, more flexibility to it. Yeah, so they don't have to abandon what they've believed, but just kind of reposition themselves or change their beliefs a little bit so that it can be more accommodating to
Yeah.
the realities of the realities of life.
And I think the heart of what I'm trying to get at with faith expansion is that other people's faith is different than my own, and my mind, my heart can expand to include that love and that respect for someone else in my worldview, and that their worldview, that I can include them and their beliefs within my worldview, even if I don't fully agree with or share those beliefs wholly.
So you mean you can like be a nice person to them even if they disagree with you?
Yes. Like I said, I'm a recovering judgmental jerk.
Oh,
I'm working on being nice to people
we are. Yeah,
that we disagree, or that I disagree with.
we all are.
Radical.
Yeah, we all think we're nice people until we get in the Instagram comments, and then we start to feel real proud of how quippy we can be.
No.
But yeah,
You're not wrong.
I know. Believe me, I know. Um,
So
and
the
then,
last piece of that was religious trauma.
oh yeah.
I would like to take a second on this, if that's okay. I do a lot of work with trauma in general, and I think it's helpful to just understand what trauma is. Religious trauma is really nothing more than a type of trauma. It's trauma that occurred in a religious setting. But what we refer to as trauma is really not about what happened to you. It's about how your body responds to what happens to you. And so it's entirely subjective. This is where I think we run into a rub a lot of times, as maybe somebody who's trying to convey that they've experienced religious trauma gets a lot of pushback from somebody who grew up in the same system. Like, what are you talking about? Everything was great for me. Okay, cool. Maybe it was. Maybe you weren't traumatized, even though you were raised in the same church, the same bishop, the same house, everything. And that's because your body did not experience the same degree of destabilization and fear and lack of safety that I experienced when I was in the system of faith. And so religious trauma is just trauma. It's how your body responds to what happened to you in the faith, in a way where, if we're going to get super technical, trauma memories get stuck in the amygdala and are not being resolved by the normal healing capacity that your brain has, which interacts with the amygdala and prefrontal cortex, which maybe is too much to explain right now. But suffice it to say, it's subjective. And I think that also one more thing I want to say about religious trauma is you can experience religious trauma, address it and work through it, and never go through faith deconstruction. It is not a requirement. Now, is it true that a lot of times people will begin a faith deconstruction as they're coming to terms with religious trauma, or vice versa? Absolutely. That's what happened with me. Is I had all these trauma triggers that I had been experiencing my whole life that related very strongly to my worthiness. I'm guessing that's not relatable to anyone. But I did
Nobody
not
here.
recognize it. Yeah, I did not recognize that as religious trauma until I was deconstructing, and I ran into a little bit of information on. I went, oh my gosh, this is a trauma trigger that I'm dealing. And then I started coming to terms with the traumatic experience that I had in the church. And so oftentimes they get conflated, I think, because deconstruction oftentimes makes people aware of traumas that exist that they've been experiencing, they just didn't have the right language for, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. Yeah, that's amazing. For me, it's it resonates a lot. I've been in a lot of discussions where it's like someone says this happened to me, and it's like, well, that didn't happen to me, and I almost feel like I need to invalidate them to
Mhm.
share my experience or defend my experience, or the roles have been reversed oftentimes. And just what you're saying, it's like, okay, maybe I can shift the way that I think about it in terms of it's more physiological and experiential and less about it being a factual thing that it happened as a fact. Therefore, it would affect everybody the same way. But these things happened and everyone had the different experiences and the physiological responses. So that's super helpful for me.
Yeah.
And I think it's important too to look at it from both sides, because yes, as a believing member, you could hear somebody who's been through religious trauma and you want to invalidate that experience, right? For whatever reason, it might feel like a threat, or like,
Yeah.
oh, they're just exaggerating, or oh, everything's trauma nowadays. I hear all these things. But on the flip side, as somebody who's coming to terms with their religious trauma, please don't assume that everyone you know in the church is being traumatized right now. I'm convinced that my wife has not experienced religious trauma. She's had a great experience in the church. It adds a lot of value to her life. And I believe her when she tells me that. And so if you want people to believe and validate your experiences, please return the favor. I think that's real. And I'll beat that drum really hard, a little more aggressively, because I feel like the ex-Mormons are my people. And so I can round them up and be like, yo, stop doing this. So please stop assuming that your negative experience in the church represents every member's experience as well. All right, I'll step off my soapbox.
Yeah. That's so, gosh, so important. I think, um, yeah, one phrase that I like to say is that if somebody has a trigger that you don't understand, it's probably because they have a trauma that you don't understand.
Wow,
Um,
that's good.
and I joined the church when I was 16, and I've realized that I think a lot of the trauma that comes to people who are raised in the church, that like I was spared because of so many of my vulnerable formative years were spent like outside of this system. There's certainly like things that did happen after that. But one thing I noticed about myself is that I often kind of accused people who usually had left the church. To me, it felt like they were overreacting. Like they were having, I'm like, it's not that big of a deal. Like you can, like, don't, like, if that triggers you, you're not going to be able to like function, like, or it almost seems like people are like making things up. And then I realized that like I had that response, but that a lot of other people who were like responding to them online seemed to really understand what they were saying. And then I thought, oh, maybe there's something that I'm just missing here, right? And there's stuff that I'm missing, right? And we all have unique situations where we can relate over some things, but not others. But I think it's easy for someone who has left the church to feel like my experience is the standard now for everyone who's left the church. So that if it wasn't a trauma for me, then, people who have left who say it was traumatic are going too far, or are being hysterical, or whatever. And then just really quick, I really appreciate you bringing up that people can have religious trauma, and not deconstruct their belief, and not have a need to deconstruct their belief. I think that's important, and I hope that those people who experience that have the space and abilities and resources to get that trauma addressed, because I would imagine that a lot of people would take the perspective of like, oh, if you have religious trauma, then the first thing you need, it's like if you are sick because there's mold growing in your house, the first thing you need to do is move out of the house, right? Like if you have religious trauma, the first thing that you need to do is leave the religion, but that's not the case for every person.
This is why we need to make this distinguishment, in my opinion, more than anything, is for the believing members who aren't deconstructing, that have also experienced religious trauma and aren't addressing it because they assume that the work would look like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else? Okay. Let's keep going on the fake Juliet's fake faith deconstruction journey. And then maybe I'll have to start paying you money and we can go down the real deconstruction journey. Um, okay. This is made up Juliet. I've publicly disaffiliated and no longer believe, but my parents keep sending me scriptures, conference talks, and similar things, saying that they're trying to be helpful or that something reminded them of me. This makes me feel uncomfortable, but I don't know how to ask them to stop without coming across as harsh. Please help me.
So this is basic boundary setting. A really good book for somebody like this is called Set Boundaries, Find Peace by Nedra Tawwab. You can find it on Amazon for like $10. It is the gold standard for boundary setting, in my opinion. But she would address this exact scenario just without the faith angle of people who are, just kind of inserting themselves in your life in ways that are uncomfortable for you. And for anyone, one of the number one things that I listen for that we've got a boundary issue here is when somebody's worried about being a jerk. Oftentimes, one of the number one barriers to setting a boundary that needs to be set is I don't want to come across like I'm a jerk, because it feels like you're rude or selfish or whatever to just express a need. You're not. You're not. There are a million kind ways that you can express a firm boundary that sounds something like, hey, mom and dad, I love you. I acknowledge that you're sharing this with me because you love me. And it also makes me uncomfortable. So would you please not share church articles with me anymore? Cool. And then hold the boundary. You're not a jerk. Even if they're treating you like you're a jerk. Maybe, I think generally speaking, most people respond okay to boundaries like that, but they're probably going to test them. They're probably still going to send you another article. And that's where the rubber really hits the road with these kinds of boundaries, is that you don't just freak out and I told you, and you don't, no, just calmly. Hey, yeah, like I said, I would like it if you would not send me articles from Dallin H. Oaks or from church leadership. I love you. Thank you. And then, yeah, if it goes on, then you might need to really explore more extreme options of how to hold that boundary. But it's not rude. It's not unkind to express a need. Maybe you grew up in a system that taught you it was, but it's not.
Yeah. I think about boundaries a lot, not in a faith context so much, but in a toddler context where holding boundaries is basically all I do all day long with my 2 and 3-year-old little boys. And, one thing that is so important when talking about toddlers, and I think boundaries in general, is like, I can tell them what I want them to do all day long. They're going to do whatever they feel like doing, right? Because 2 and 3. People in general are going to do what they feel like doing. And really, boundary setting isn't about choosing what other people do, because we don't actually control. We can't choose what other people do. Boundary setting is being clear about how we will respond to certain behavior and following up with that, right? So, like,
Did you read the book?
what was that?
Did you read the book I suggested?
No, I've just been in the game for a long time of
Yeah,
boundaries.
'cause that's like exactly what it gets at. It's very well stated. Good job.
And so, like, if I tell my son not to throw the ball at the TV, holding the boundary isn't me repeating myself over and over. Me holding the boundary is saying, if you throw the ball at the TV, I'm taking the ball away and then taking the ball away. Hopefully, if I can get to it the first time it happens. So I'm trying to apply that to this situation in a practical way. You ask your parents not to send you the scriptures. They send you the scriptures. So if we're applying the principle of it's not about telling them what to do, it's about saying what you're going to do. I think that this is where it can get kind of tricky because, people don't want to like seem like a jerk. But do you think it'd be too much for someone to be like, hey, like, if you send me things like this, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to delete them because I'm not really comfortable with them. And then if someone sends it to you saying like, hey, like, I know you're thinking of me. I know you love me. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm just going to delete this because, like I said, I'm not comfortable. Do you think that would be okay?
Totally. I think it'd be okay. I think it also would be okay at a certain point to get into how it's affecting the relationship. Like, hey, mom, this is actively creating resentment in me now. Like I've asked you to do this. I really feel like you can respect this and you're actively choosing not to. And I'm having feelings about that, right? I'm deleting them. I'm not going to respond to them. Please stop. And, on the most extreme end, I would rarely see something like, just sending conference talks, get to this end. But on the extreme end of boundary setting, it can lead to relationships being cut off if there's just zero respect for boundaries. But generally speaking, that's not the case. It's usually it takes a couple times of reinforcing a boundary, and I think most parents and people, kind of get the idea that okay, but there's no reason to send this anymore.
Yeah.
Can I
Yeah.
share?
Gotta hold the boundary.
I was gonna say, can I share an example of what not to do?
Yeah. You're full of those.
I love these.
Yeah, I am full of these. I went back because this sparked a memory, and so I looked back at my family chat because a member of my family sent Elder Corbridge's Stand Forever talk, which is like where he talks about like the primary questions, like secondary questions are not as important or whatever. And anyway, I didn't say anything in the moment. I did talk to this family member after the fact and, kind of let them know why I didn't appreciate that and so forth. But a couple days after that, I sent in response, well, maybe not in response, but I kind of felt, well, if they could send something, I can send something. I just sent like an Alex O'Connor. If you don't know who he is, he's an
I
atheist.
love him. He's
Yeah,
great.
it's like a viewpoint of like, do we actually have free will, basically? And so I just kind of like said that. And anyway, I don't think that was very helpful to this conversation by me just like reciprocating what was happening.
Yeah. Can I ask like what you think would have been a better way, like looking back on it for you to respond?
Yeah. Because I definitely feel like I did this too, especially at the beginning of my like leaving the church. Um, for instance, like shortly after I told my parents I didn't believe anymore, I sent them an email with like something from LDS discussions, basically explaining why the Book of Mormon is not what we think it is, and so forth. And I look back on that, and that was not the thing to do. Very, very childish of me, and I didn't think that through very well. So I think looking back, I probably would have said something maybe in the group chat a little bit more like, I can appreciate that you like this talk. Not everyone in this chat feels similarly, I know, at least speaking for myself. Maybe we can kind of keep this place free from that kind of stuff. Otherwise, we might need to do something about that. So,
Ooh,
Not drastic.
that sounded kind
Not
of
violent.
threatening.
yeah, growing up in Mormonism, confrontations of the devil, I'm still working on like even just like the tiniest bit of confrontation
Yeah.
is something that like I struggle with. So,
Yeah.
It's hard.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Mitch, what you've just described, or for me at least, is like the reverse. It can go both directions. And I myself has been on the giving side and the receiving side of I've mentioned it in the past, like bludgeoning others with scriptures to convince them of my position so that they follow me and I control them is essentially the impact that it has on them, even though that's not my intention initially. But I have another question that kind of correlates with what we're talking about from the position of the parents who are worried about the eternal salvation as well as even just the temporal salvation of their child. So here's my question. Why are we so uncomfortable when someone we love is uncertain? Can certainty itself become an unhealthy coping mechanism? So it shifts it a little bit to this idea of certainty, but I think it's in the realm of what we've been talking about, trying to understand why I do what I do and trying to be empathetic and compassionate for understanding why others do what they do when it comes to this conflict and these almost debates that naturally come up.
I love that. I wish I wish I had a lot of parents coming in my office that were still in the church asking those kinds of questions because I'd love to help them. But you know what? Maybe they're working with other therapists who are helpful. But where my mind goes with that is just love your kids. Like that's generally speaking what the conventional wisdom is love your kids. But what does it look like to love your kids? How do people and what I would suggest is try to get yourself into a place where you're not loving them the way that you've been taught to or the way that you think that you need to love them, but how do they need to be loved right now? And I'll tell you right now, I rarely speak in blanket statements. I think I can probably make a blanket statement on this. Almost every single ex-Mormon child out there just wants you to listen and understand where they're coming from. Get curious, right? you don't need to resolve it for them. You don't need to create a sense of certainty for them. You need to love them and express confidence in them and ask them questions about where they're at and genuinely listen and just let them figure it out. I think that even from a theological standpoint, at the core of Mormonism should be the right to choose, the right to figure things out on your own. That's what the whole war in heaven was fought over, right? And so let them make a choice and look at the fruits of their choice, right? And gauge that not based off the first year of them leaving, right? Like it's a little bit chaotic at first. Give it time to breathe. I don't know. I'm getting into territory that requires a lot of explanation, but I feel like fundamentally all I have ever wanted and all I think a lot of my clients has ever wanted from their parents is just somebody who's going to listen and not judge them for what they're going through, because I still have yet to meet somebody who left the church because they wanted to be miserable, because they wanted to drink, because they wanted to, just throw away everything they've been taught their whole life. It's usually an integrity question. I actually had a really cool interaction. I have a cousin who's a bishop actually in Utah Valley. And we were at a family reunion at Bear Lake a couple weeks ago, and he pulled up a lawn chair and sat next to me. And he's like, Andy, I know that you've left the church. And I wanted to ask you about it because I've come to learn and appreciate that usually people don't leave for the reasons that people assume they do. It's usually about integrity. And I was just like, wow, thank you for acknowledging that, because yes, like that, people don't make big life altering choices frivolously, right? It's usually because they feel like what they're doing is right. And to have some baseline benefit of the doubt given to your kids that acknowledges that they're probably trying to do what they believe is right, or it's probably an integrity thing, or get curious about some of the reasons and listen and believe them. That's, you don't need to create the certainty. I think that's what you need to do. I don't know. Does that help answer your question? I got a little rambly there.
Absolutely. That's amazing.
Cool.
It reminds me, so we had Jeff Strong on a few months ago, and something that I heard him say that has just resonated so much over the last few days and weeks is love. If love is conditional, it's not love, it's leverage. And that hits me in the heart really strongly with guilt. Just all of the times that I've maybe in the intent and the hope of showing love, expressing love, showing myself that I love them, I'm really trying to leverage them to have me control them, is what it comes down to.
Love is not something you capture and hold on to. It's something you let go.
Yeah.
That's not my idea. That's Neil Donald Walsh, I think. But
Awesome.
Well, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
That really hit me too about the love and the leverage. Yeah. Well,
I like Jeff Strong. I'm in his fan club, by the way.
yeah, we are too.
Yeah.
Big time. We're big time fans. Literally, I was in charge of the book club. That's how much of a fan we are.
Yeah.
That I made it myself. Well, I think we're all done. I think that we're at time.
Yeah, we are at time.
Thank you so much for being here, Andy. We'll have to have you back sometime if that's okay, because
I would
there's
love
so
to
much
come
more to
back.
talk
This
about.
was a fun conversation. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing the questions you brought. I thought that they hit on a lot of really valuable topics for people who are going through this.
Okay. Well, yeah. Thanks again so much for being here.
Yep.
You bet.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, listening and viewing audiences. And just a reminder, as always, to like, share, subscribe. And if you are able and willing to support us in this, it is a financial, I don't know if it's a burden necessarily because of the return that I'm getting, but it definitely is a resource used as far as the time and the finances and the 40-minute to an hour long drive.
It is a
to make
money
it here,
funnel.
so.
It's just funneling the wrong direction.
Yeah, that's true.
Really quick, Andy, I just want to make sure that we give Andy a chance to let people know
Oh, yeah.
where they can find you. And then also are you taking new clients?
Oh, yes, I am taking new clients actually. The summer got is a little bit slow actually. Sometimes the answer is no, but right now the answer is yes. So now's your window.
Okay.
And I have Instagram and TikTok. That's the primary platforms that I post on. Usually you can just pick one. What I post on Instagram, I probably post on TikTok, vice versa. So if you prefer one or the other, you're not going to be missing out. And I think my handle's just Andy Newman LPC.
I think so too.
Actually, I think it's Andy Newman LPC on Instagram and Deconstruction Therapy on TikTok.
Okay. Awesome. Sorry.
No, no problem. Thanks, Juliet. Thanks, Mitch. And thanks so much, Andy. And bye, everyone.
Bye.